On a bitterly cold day, a young man walked alone through the falling snow in weather so harsh it felt as if winter itself had frozen solid. Remembering the temperature was 20 degrees below zero. As he trudged on, he noticed a small cat struggling through the snow, leaving delicate prints, and when it clung to his leg and meowed insistently, he wondered why it cried so desperately until he realized it wanted him to follow. Feeling pity in the brutal cold, he chose not to ignore it, and the cat led him into a narrow, shadowy alley where, under the light of his phone, he discovered two kittens shivering atop an outdoor air conditioning unit. Shocked, he rushed home, asked his surprised mother for the heating pad, and gently placed the kittens on it while she and the mother cat looked on. One kitten, black and white, seemed lifeless, and though his mother said it was likely dead, he refused to give up, stroking its frail body and even using a hairdryer, until, just as he was about to despair, it let out a faint whimper. From that moment, he became its caretaker, naming it Peachy, and 8 years later, Peachy, now grown but with her leg in a splint, sat beside him as he softly told her he had to go. He then sat down to say goodbye, apologizing and telling her that this was truly the last day, promising that he would finish his business and return to play with her, warning Peachy not to jump or make any dangerous moves until her leg healed before telling her he was leaving now. The young man placed an electronic helmet on his head, and a message appeared on the screen confirming biometric authentication. As the helmet lit up, another message indicated a successful login to the world of Meta area under the name Servant Kim. Inside the game, Servant Kim performed a solemn religious ritual, odds for strength to punish injustice, blessings for the warriors, resilience for their spirits, and protection against evil energy, before ordering one of the warrior ranks to advance as he fully immersed himself in the battle's atmosphere. The clash raged fiercely as his team faced a massive monster, while golden holy strikes rained down upon it from above. But the creature retaliated with a violent wave of purple energy that sent the warriors sprawling, then forged a sword of pure energy for another devastating attack. After days of relentless struggle, the battle was finally reaching its conclusion, with the final Flash team on the brink of becoming the first in block. Servant Kim braced himself to block the monster's strike with his shield, which glowed with the emblem of a shining lion, while Locke unleashed a volley of projectiles through magic circles that fused into a colossal beam, obliterating the ground beneath the warriors until Kim intercepted it with a shield. Immediately after, he commanded the first rank to hold their positions and ordered the third rank to retreat, warning them of an even greater assault that was about to come. The monster's devastating attack continued to damage the warrior ranks, so he ordered the second rank to line up behind him, announcing that the monster was about to enter its final phase. The warriors prepared to use their ultimate skill as glowing hexagonal shields began to appear, while in response, Locke also prepared to launch its strongest attack. Servant Kim explained that this was the monster's last attempt and asked everyone to remain alert, assuring them that they would finish it off using the second rank's ultimate skill. He activated his defensive skills using Holy Shield, Sanctuary Blessing, declaring himself the unbreakable shield. He assured them that they had reached the point where all other teams had failed and stressed the need to follow the plan precisely or the entire team would be wiped out. They had entered a phase no one had reached before, and their success depended entirely on his ability to block the monster's upcoming attack. Locke fired a massive beam of purple energy from its mouth, and the faces of all team members were filled with determination. Their plan was to endure and then launch an all-out attack to end the battle. Filled with the hope that they would be the first to achieve this historic feat, Servant Kim knelt behind his glowing hexagonal shield, ready to receive the immense blow, but at the crucial moment he disappeared, and a message appeared announcing his logout from the game. The rest of the team was left in complete shock and disbelief, and one of them began to scream in despair, asking where their leader had gone. In the real world, a system message appeared on the young man's screen, stating that an abnormal condition had been detected in his body, and the connection was forcibly terminated, asking if he needed immediate rescue. The young man was lying on his bed, flailing, while something on his face was preventing him from breathing, until he suddenly sat up, gasping for breath, only to discover that his cat Peachy was sitting on his face on top of the helmet, and he screamed at her in anger, asking why she would do that at such a critical moment. His scream echoed outside his window as the reality sank in. Because of his sudden logout, his team had failed the battle, and a rival squad seized the chance to claim the historic first achievement of defeating the monster. The young man cried out in anguish, knowing his team had lost valuable rating points, dropped in the rankings, and wasted 5 months of preparation. As expected, the aftermath turned into a tragedy, sparking a major legal meeting to discuss the consequences of the raid's failure. The game's meta area had become a worldwide phenomenon, hailed as the first true metaverse, and after its release, countless people preferred living within it rather than in reality, with work, careers, and even daily routines tied to the virtual world. Society shifted to the point where it was no longer strange for someone to introduce their occupation as an archer, and top players in the meta area gained wealth, fame, and even national recognition. With professional players on the rise, new laws were drafted, and specialized firms like the Dodo law firm emerged to handle disputes. One law, in particular, allowed monster raid teams to demand compensation from a member responsible for a failed raid. Because of this, official contracts became standard before major events. During one such meeting, team members looked visibly displeased as a claim was filed against Servant Kim by 15 plaintiffs, demanding enormous compensation for their ranking loss, a canceled sponsorship deal, and wasted months of effort, with the total amount reaching an astronomical $1,125,000,000. Stunned, the young man struggled to process the sum while the lawyer formally read the demand. He explained that their squad had 10 core members and 15 mercenaries, and though disagreements arose, the session ended with him agreeing to pay, comforted somewhat by the support of his 9 closest teammates. Still feeling crushed, he left the law firm in defeat, only to hear a voice call out to him, addressing him as leader. The man asked if it was true that he had sold his gear in the game, and he admitted it was, explaining that it had been the only way to compensate the mercenaries, recalling with a heavy heart how he had parted with all his precious items worth hundreds of millions. The man then asked why he wanted to play solo now, and the young man smiled as he explained that ever since becoming raid leader, he had hardly spent any time with his cat and felt guilty toward her. To his surprise, the man announced that he was quitting the game altogether, shocking him. And though he felt responsible and apologized, the man reassured him that he understood and held no resentment. As a farewell, he presented him with a box marked with the Metagar brand, but the young man initially refused, saying he couldn't accept his teammates' gear after everything that had happened, until the man insisted, explaining that he no longer needed it. After exchanging goodbyes, the young man thanked him sincerely before returning home, where he greeted his cats, sat wearily on the floor by the entrance, and sighed deeply as Peachy came over and meowed, as if to comfort him. Lost in thought, he wondered what to do next, since all his post-retirement plans had relied on the gear he had just sold. When he noticed Peachy trying to jump and play, he gently scolded her, reminding her not to strain herself until her leg was fully healed, but she insisted, and touched by her determination, he agreed to play with her for just 5 minutes. He began with warm-up exercises, dragging a mouse-shaped toy across the floor while his cat stared at it with fierce concentration. She quickly became enthusiastically engaged in the game, chasing the toy across the room, and the young man thought about how frustrated his energetic cat must have been during her injury when she couldn't move freely. After the warm-up, he announced that hunting time had begun, having set up a playground of cardboard boxes. And as the cat readied herself to pounce, he declared with mock seriousness that he had transformed into a mouse and would now show her perfect, mouse-like movements. He moved the toy with skill, even mimicking squeaks to catch her attention, while Peachy hid inside one of the boxes, eyes fixed on her prey, before leaping out in an attempt to seize it. Laughing, he encouraged her to keep going, saying it was time to reward her servant for playing so diligently with her. She dashed back into the box, looking so cute that he couldn't help but smile. And after a few tries, she finally caught the toy, leaving him amused at how addicted he was to playing with her. When the session ended, he prepared food for both his cats, Peachy and Lulu, and jokingly told Lulu that this meat had been hunted by Peachy and that she should thank her. Then he realized with a start that he had played for 10 minutes instead of 5, remembering the veterinarian's warning to avoid letting Peachy strain herself until she fully healed. His thoughts drifted back to his conversation with the doctor, who explained that Peachy was brimming with energy and grew stressed if she couldn't play. And he'd been considering ways to help her burn energy without too much movement when his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a scheduled withdrawal of over $1,000,000, and he remembered, with a sinking feeling, that he had forgotten about the hospital bill installments. Distressed and unsure of what to do now that he had no money left to cover his expenses, his eyes fell on the box his teammate had given him. So, he decided to open the box, remembering how one of his teammates had given him the gear before retiring from the game. Turning to his cat Peachy, he told her she was partly responsible for this incident and that if she ever met his teammate, she should apologize to him. Jokingly, he placed the empty box on his head, noting that at least he could breathe properly this time and that such an incident wouldn't happen again. Glancing at the clock, he realized it was getting late, so he bid farewell to his cats and promised he would return. Accepting that reaching the top ranks again would be difficult, he lay on his bed, placed the new gear box over his head, and reminded himself that one must always strive to make a living. And so, Servant Kim logged into the game once more, determined to fulfill his duty as a servant to his cats. His plan was risky, but with high rewards, as he ventured into the lava zone, fully aware of the danger, given his weakened state after selling all his gear. He gambled on the idea that another raid team would be busy fighting the Phoenix, which meant the surrounding monsters wouldn't respawn. Though he knew this was based on memories from 6 years ago, and updates could have changed everything. By luck, he managed to catch a massive armored fish from the lava, and his heart leapt with joy when he realized his golden fishing spot still existed. The fish was a lava buoy, a rare ingredient, and he calculated that catching 50 of them would be enough to cover his hospital installment. Settling down, he quietly cast his line again, reflecting on how long it had been since he spent time alone like this, since the past 5 years had been consumed entirely by raids with his team. Though he had lost everything he had built in a single moment, he felt an unexpected peace wash over him, his eyes welling with tears as he wondered if something had gotten into them. Suddenly, he sensed something strange and alarming, wondering in shock if the Phoenix was respawning earlier than expected. A massive vortex opened in the sky, and from it a blinding beam of light crashed into the ground, unleashing a devastating shockwave. Out of the light emerged a creature resembling a wolf, its body wreathed in pale, celestial flames. The young man immediately realized this was no Phoenix. It was a new boss monster, majestic and terrifying, clearly designed for a raid team to defeat. With his current strength, escape was impossible, and facing it alone would be suicide. Cursing his awful luck, he lamented that he had only managed to catch a single fish before a new monster appeared to claim his only fishing spot. Desperately, he hoped it would simply leave, but his blood ran cold as he suddenly felt the monster's enormous jaws right behind his head. Terrified, he braced for the end, yet the beast didn't strike. Instead, it leaned forward and licked his face with its massive tongue. Bewildered and dripping with saliva, he tried to comprehend this bizarre behavior, even half-jokingly wondering if the monster intended to drown him with slobber. Disgusted and furious, he shouted at it to kill him quickly and cleanly, snapping that he was in no mood for this torment. In a final act of defiance, he pointed at the creature and declared that though it could kill him now, because he was weak, he swore one day he would be the one to defeat it. The colossal beast tilted its head curiously at him, then let out a deep, rumbling meow. Stunned, the young man froze, questioning his own ears, only to confirm that he had indeed heard a meow. He concluded that the monster was designed in the form of a cat, and found himself oddly impressed by the creative idea of making such a majestic, fearsome, and non-cute cat. Then, out of nowhere, a bold idea struck him. He connected the fact that the monster resembled a cat, and that he was holding a fishing rod, and thought he might survive if he used the bait to distract it before escaping. Deciding to take the gamble, he shouted at the beast to wait and promised it a treat, then hurled the fish he had caught. Though he doubted it would work, he figured it was worth trying, and to his shock, the plan succeeded. The monster eagerly pounced on the fish. Relieved but conflicted, he paused and tugged on the line, unwilling to part with the catch so easily, but the creature held it firmly. Panicking, he threw the rod aside and chose survival over stubbornness. The monster devoured the entire fish in one gulp, licking its lips with satisfaction. But once it finished, its fiery gaze returned to him. In a flash, it lunged forward with staggering speed, unleashing a wave of energy and a deafening howl. Fear gripped him as he questioned what kind of creature this truly was, until the system abruptly announced his death, informing him he would respawn as a ghost in the graveyard. As a spirit, he watched the monster curiously nudge his corpse, praying it would lose interest, but instead it rolled him over and began kneading his chest with its massive paws like a house cat. Horrified by this bizarre sight, he quickly fled to the graveyard. There, in front of a towering angel statue, he was given the option to revive at the cost of losing 5% of his experience. With a heavy sigh, he accepted, determined to reclaim his fishing spot. Pulling up the map, he reasoned that since the lava zone belonged to the Phoenix, the new monster's appearance was likely temporary. Holding on to that fragile hope, he drifted back as a ghost toward the lava zone, praying the cat-like beast had vanished. But his hope was shattered when he saw the monster still there, circling his lifeless body. He couldn't understand why it was guarding his corpse instead of leaving, until he assumed with growing dread that the damn cat was waiting for him to revive just so it could kill him again. Realizing he had only one possible solution, he devised a simple two-step plan. First, revive the moment the monster turned its back, and second, sprint in the opposite direction as fast as possible. He stayed put, watching carefully for his chance. The beast eventually laid down beside his body and seemed to drift off, and he knew this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. Without hesitation, he accepted the revival option and reappeared beside the slumbering creature. Nervously swallowing, he tried to sneak away, but before he could even take a second step, the monster's eyes snapped open and it rose up behind him. Frozen in terror, he wondered if it had only been pretending to sleep. Then he felt its massive paw press down heavily on his shoulder. He screamed and tried to break free, but the beast caught him easily and crushed him with a single devastating blow, instantly triggering the "you have died" message once again. The monster gazed down at his body with what looked like a confused expression. Back in the graveyard, he was presented with the revival option yet again, and he thought bitterly that he had finally discovered a reliable way to escape, never imagining that one day he would use the tactical maneuvers he had once practiced in the army. This time, when he revived, he didn't run. Instead, he flattened himself on the ground in a crawling position, fully convinced his plan would succeed. Slowly and cautiously, he inched forward, pausing every time he sensed the monster opening its eye. When the monster closed its eyes again, he resumed crawling forward in complete silence. But a faint sound escaped him, and to his shock the beast immediately turned its gaze toward him. He froze as it approached and began licking him again, eager for another round of bizarre play, and he realized with horror that he had gotten tangled up with the wrong kind of psycho. After dying for the third time, he screamed in sheer frustration, and in the real world, he pummeled his pillow in anger. Fed up with that deranged monster, he finally decided to call a night, convinced he would end up with an ulcer if he kept going, and tried to reassure himself that even a creature like that wouldn't wait around for him until the next day. As he wandered his room, still irritated, his eyes fell on Peachy, who was fast asleep with her head tucked inside the game helmet. He couldn't help but smile faintly, calling her a little rascal and remarking that she wasn't even using the hideout he had bought for her. But then, an odd sensation struck him. He noticed the X-shaped scar on her forehead was in the exact same spot as the scar on the monster in the game. Stunned for a moment, he quickly brushed it off as impossible, laughing sarcastically at himself for even imagining such nonsense, reasoning that there was no way a cat could log into the game, and it had to be nothing more than coincidence. The following day, he re-entered the game, praying the monster had finally gone. Looking around nervously, he felt a wave of relief when he saw the area empty and laughed at his good fortune. But just as he let his guard down, the ground trembled and a monster reappeared before him, letting out a meow, and he completely lost his temper, swearing he wouldn't fish for lava buoy again if it meant dealing with this nightmare. The monster turned and presented its back to him, and the young man shut his eyes in despair, only to open them and find himself staring awkwardly at its rear. Out of nowhere, a system message appeared, declaring he had been chosen and granted a hidden servant class. Confused, he repeated the words servant and chosen, trying to make sense of them, when another message announced that the power of Keenness now resided within him. He cried out in protest, furious that he had never heard of such a class before, realizing in panic that he was being forced into it against his will. A cyclone formed as dark energy swirled around his body, and when it ended, a final message confirmed his transformation into a servant. Stunned and angry, he wondered what had happened to his Holy Knight character and why his class had been overwritten. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his head, addressing him as servant and asking if he could hear it, and he realized with horror that it was the giant cat speaking directly into his mind. The voice introduced itself with an overlong, grandiose title, proclaiming it was the conqueror who descended to stain the earth with darkness, the embodiment of shadow, Keenness, protector of the three kingdoms, and first emperor of Noxtera. Sarcastically, the young man noted that the beast was still facing away, forcing him to receive a pompous lecture from its rear. Keenis then explained that something had gone wrong during its summoning, and its body could not move properly, which was why it had chosen him as its servant. Bewildered, the young man wondered if this was some hidden quest and asked what Keenis wanted from him, only to be told he must become its hands and feet and aid it in reclaiming its true body. A tutorial quest window appeared, instructing him to learn his duties, practice skills, and check his master's status with a mysterious reward called RPP, which immediately piqued his curiosity. Suddenly, the monster began acting like an ordinary cat, rubbing its body against his leg and meowing, which startled him until he realized it was doing what people called butt rubbing. Irritated, he complained about this absurd situation where his class had been forcibly changed, and now he was expected to serve. In response, Keenis calmly stated that if he disliked it, he could be returned to his former state. The young man, however, decided to investigate this new class first and discovered that a servant serves their master while earning role-playing points, RP, that can be spent to wield the master's abilities. Reviewing his listed duties, checking the master's status, providing a comfortable home, and offering delicious treats, he noted they resembled the obligations of a cat caretaker more than those of a warrior. Deciding to figure out how the points worked later, he completed the quest and opened his skills window, which oddly included hunt a monster and make snacks, leading him to conclude the servant class was essentially a tamer role. As he contemplated quitting, the reminder of the hospital bills came to mind, sparking a new idea. If he could negotiate his rewards and working hours, the situation might not be entirely bad. Changing his tone completely, he addressed the monster with respect, acknowledging its frustration, and formally introduced himself as Servant Kim, boasting that he was an expert in studying cats and assuring Keenis it had chosen wisely. When Keenis asked if he could truly handle the task, he confidently replied that actions spoke louder than words. The young man knew the monster did not fear him, but he chose to turn that into an advantage by explaining to Keenis that cats dislike strangers approaching, then carefully reached out to pet the creature. To his surprise, the monster responded happily, rubbing against him and meowing, and Keenis, impressed by the scene, admitted it was starting to trust him, to which the young man confidently replied that it would never find a servant like him. A message appeared announcing that their communication was successful, showing Keenis' status as anxious with a high stress index, thus completing the quest to check its condition. Curious about the cause of his master's stress, the young man quickly realized monsters were beginning to respawn in the area, and when a small fire salamander appeared, he informed Keenis that it was in a state of severe anxiety. When Keenis demanded to know why, the young man reasoned that the unfamiliar environment was the cause, explaining that cats grow anxious outside their territory. But Keenis dismissed this, declaring that anxiety was for the weak and that the solution was to claim the entire world as its territory. Acting instinctively, Keenis' body lunged at the salamander, but when the prey escaped, the stress index climbed even higher, and Keenis roared furiously in frustration. At that moment, the young man activated the capture skill, aiming a frame shaped like a silver platter at the fleeing salamander, and when it opened, an assistant message confirmed the capture. Holding the covered platter calmly, he presented it to his master as part of his service, then asked if it had been greatly disappointed by losing its prey, before finally lifting the lid to release the captured salamander. Immediately, Keenis crushed the salamander to vent its anger, and the young man asked his master's opinion of his service, soon receiving a message that its mood had improved and its stress index had decreased. Keenis admitted it felt calmer, and the young man expressed satisfaction. Then, seeing an opportunity after proving his worth, suggested they begin negotiations. With a smile, he explained that he had a family to support, which meant he needed vacation time and enough money to secure his livelihood. Keenis was stunned by the idea of a servant taking a vacation, and the young man nervously confirmed it was true. Keenis then admitted it possessed none of the local currency, so the young man proposed an alternative solution. He would keep all items Keenis acquired through hunting. Since Keenis needed him to control its body, it accepted this arrangement and asked if that was sufficient, to which the young man happily agreed. He reflected on how he had been lost after losing the chance to fish for lava buri, only to realize that monopolizing his master's loot was far more profitable and safer. Feeling luck was finally smiling on him, he thought to himself that every cloud has a silver lining. Observing that Keenis immediately lost interest once a monster's corpse vanished, he wondered if it truly was just a giant cat. Finally, he decided to complete the last step of his service, activating the Make Snack skill, where the system revealed the only available option was salt-grilled. With a single magical motion, he finished the task, and a bowl containing salt-grilled salamander appeared before him. The system asked if he wished to inform his master that the snack was ready, and he agreed with curiosity, only for Keenis to appear beside him, drawn by the aroma, making the young man realize that the snack-making skill also served as a way to summon his unpredictable master. Keenis tasted the food with great admiration, licked the bowl clean, and demanded more, to which the young man eagerly agreed, promising to bring another serving right away. System messages then confirmed the completion of his tutorial quest, awarding him 20 role-playing points along with 5 additional points for satisfying his master, while a new quest for the second phase appeared. The young man began gathering the items dropped by the monsters Keenis hunted, noticing how the battlefield was filling with creatures and how his master was relentlessly cutting them down. He couldn't help smiling as he realized his pockets grew heavier with money without him lifting a finger, and he wondered happily if this was what auto-hunting truly felt like. Excited, he rushed around collecting loot and thanking his master with enthusiasm, which Keenis noticed, prompting the young man to promise that he would do his utmost to serve him well. When his skill's cooldown ended, he used it again eagerly, and Keenis came rushing over to devour the next meal. Opening the quest window, the young man accepted the second phase, which tasked him with solving a problem his master faced, moving to a nearby town, with 50 points as a reward. Though it seemed simple at first, he quickly realized his dilemma. How was he supposed to drag this enormous cat into town? The status window appeared again, warning that Keenis's stress index would spike if he left his territory, and the young man realized that this was the challenge he now had to overcome. Approaching Keenis by the volcanic lava pool, he confidently told his master that he had a plan, and Keenis ordered him to explain. He suggested that there must be a reason why Keenis had been summoned to this area, and that the most logical step was to head to a nearby town to gather information. And though Keenis agreed with his reasoning, the young man felt slightly guilty since the idea had originally come from the quest he had accepted. Keenis wondered how such a move could be achieved, and whether its body was bound by the instincts of a cat's territory, to which the young man reminded him that each monster defeated expanded his territory, something Keenis confirmed. Building on that, the young man explained that they would have to defeat the region's master, the Phoenix, in order to move freely, and when Keenis asked about its strength, he described it as an immortal bird that grew stronger each time it resurrected. Intrigued, Keenis declared it would kneel before his might, but the young man quickly pointed out the problem. The Phoenix breathed fire, and the instincts of a cat would force Keenis's body to run and hide. Thus, he concluded that the first step was to make Keenis unafraid of fire. The moment flames were introduced, Keenis's body reacted instinctively, leaping back and rolling on the ground in panic, before admitting the fear was real and ordering his servant to find a way to conquer it at any cost. In response, the young man presented a lava buri fish and boldly claimed that the fear would vanish once Keenis submerged himself in lava, which left Keenis shocked as he asked if the plan was to throw him into a volcano. The young man confirmed without hesitation that this was the surest method of adaptation, and though Keenis expressed doubt, he reassured him, explaining that his body as a boss monster had extremely high heat resistance, which surprised Keenis, while the young man held up the fish to tempt him into trying. The young man tossed the fish into the lava, but Keenis merely sat calmly on a rock in the middle of it, astonishing him, and when Keenis declared the fish no longer tempted him, the young man was shocked at how quickly his master had lost interest. Then, with a graceful leap, Keenis jumped out of the lava, forcing the young man to move on to Plan B. Using a recall spell to return to a registered point, he told his master he would be back soon, which sent Keenis into a panic, asking where he was going and if he intended to leave him alone. But before it could react further, the young man vanished through the portal, leaving Keenis to search restlessly. Instantly, he appeared in the city of Grenadia, where he went straight to the adventurer's warehouse and was greeted by the shopkeeper. He asked for sugarcane, ethereal spring water, a climbing rope, and dynamite, and when she inquired about his intentions, he replied that he was planning to tame a monster, before casually adding that he also needed a catapult, which puzzled her. She wished him success, and, as he stepped out, he suddenly felt he had forgotten something, hurried back, and requested one final item. Returning to the lava zone, he approached a giant tree known as Bugenmak, or the wood that does not burn, explaining that a monster living within it had gained fire resistance by feeding on its bark. He climbed the tree and set sugarcane as bait, knowing the creature's fondness for sweets and remembering how difficult it had been to hunt it in the past. The tree began to shake as a fiery monster burst out, introducing itself as Kororos, the great guardian of the underworld, and angrily demanding to know who dared disturb its slumber. While Kororos devoured the sugarcane, the young man poured ethereal spring water on it, a substance capable of extinguishing even the fiercest flames and stripping fire resistance for 5 minutes. And with satisfaction, he noted that the favorite prey of cats was always the mouse. As Kororos' flames were snuffed out and the mighty guardian of the underworld transformed into a small, fluffy pink fire mouse. The fire mouse cried out in shock, demanding to know what the young man had done. But he cheerfully replied that it looked as cute as always, which only angered the creature further as it threatened him, though he continued to mock it. When the mouse tried a bargain, promising to spare his life in exchange for sugarcane, he dismissed it as pathetically cute, and sensing something was wrong, the mouse realized it could not use its fire and chose to attack physically, shouting that it had already given him a chance to live. Yet in the middle of its assault, it suddenly turned and bolted, vowing to kill him the next time they met. But as it leapt into a nearby lava pool, the young man called out in vain, then smirked sarcastically, remarking that he had been about to tell it no longer had fire resistance. Screams of agony erupted from the mouse as the lava seared its body, and while it writhed and tried to escape, the young man doubled over in hysterical laughter, mocking its misery as it cried. At that moment, a new tutorial window appeared, informing him that he could use role-playing points, or RPP, to turn a monster into a follower immune to its master's attacks and able to grow stronger with points. Seizing the sobbing mouse, he carried it in his arms as it nervously asked what he was doing and where he was taking it. But with feigned seriousness he apologized, saying he planned to offer it as a sacrifice to his master and urged it not to speak so he would not get attached. Horrified, the mouse lamented its fate, wailing that it would die before ever getting married, and he mocked its sorrow with sarcastic pity, calling it a shame, until the creature desperately begged for its life. At last, the young man relented, saying there was a way out. If the mouse obeyed his orders, it would not only be spared, but he would even help it find a partner to marry. The mouse instantly agreed and anxiously asked what it needed to do, and the young man calmed it before explaining that the first way to survive was to become his master's follower, assuring it that a follower would be immune to the master's attacks and thus guaranteed to live, while the second option was to lure the master into the lava, which horrified the mouse, who called him an ungrateful servant. Reluctantly, the mouse chose the first option and reminded him of his promise. So the young man opened the Create Follower window and activated the process as a magic circle formed around the fire mouse, transforming it into pure essence and sealing it beneath his silver platter, with the system confirming that the fire mouse had been registered as a follower. The scene then shifted back to Keenis, who waited impatiently and demanded to know why his servant had taken so long. But the young man only smiled and told it to prepare itself for something that would excite it more than anything in the world. With that, he released the mouse from the platter, and the moment Keenis laid eyes on it, an unfamiliar thrill surged through its body, making its heart pound wildly. The young man named the mouse Squeaky and assigned it the crucial role of helping its master overcome fear of the phoenix, instructing it to lead Keenis for the grand cause of darkness. Handing the mouse a speed potion, he sent it dashing off at full speed, igniting Keenis's hunting instincts, and the great cat immediately sprang after it, bounding eagerly across rocks with unrestrained excitement as it chased the fiery mouse straight toward the lava. Determined not to let the mouse escape, it unleashed a burst of fire, but Keenis deftly dodged the attack and continued to close in, while the young man observed from a distance, clutching the dynamite detonator in case he needed to buy the mouse more time. The mouse realized bitterly that the young man had deceived it, but suddenly he appeared in front of Keenis, blocking its path and shouting at the mouse to keep running, leaving Keenis startled by this interference until the young man quickly apologized for the misunderstanding. The mouse sprinted until it squeezed through a crack that opened to a cliff above a vast lava lake, only to find itself cornered as Keenis declared escape impossible and threatened to play with it. But the mouse defiantly challenged it and leapt across the molten lake. Without hesitation, Keenis gave chase, completely forgetting its fear of fire and the thrill of pursuit, and the young man quietly noted how its movements reminded him of his pet cat. When Keenis asked if this cat was the family he had spoken of before, The young man confirmed and fondly described Peachy as small, adorable, and stubborn, recalling how she would reject his touch at first only to later rest her paw on his hand. And smiling at the memory, he laid his hand on Keenis's massive paw, offering his support before gently nudging it toward the lava. To Keenis's surprise, the lava felt soothing, like a warm bath, and it immersed itself eagerly, no longer bound by fear. The young man assured it that now it was ready to face the phoenix, and Keenis, brimming with confidence, agreed just as the fiery bird appeared on the horizon, while the young man explained that victory depended on stopping its rebirth and proudly revealed that he had already prepared a strategy, prompting Keenis to call him a truly dependable servant. The phoenix rose from the lava in a blaze of fire as the young man and his master readied themselves, spreading its burning wings wide before unleashing a torrent of flames that Keenis evaded with ease. But the young man knew the true danger was its immortality and explained that to defeat it, Keenis must strike its core during its second rebirth. A feat his master doubted until the young man assured him with confidence that he would create the opportunity. Their battle began as the phoenix swooped down and Keenis charged head-on, chasing it into the sky, nimbly dodging bursts of fire until he clung to the bird and drove it forcefully into the ground, leaving it defeated but vowing to rise again, prompting the young man to calmly declare that the first phase was complete and warn that its power would double. True to his words, the phoenix erupted from the lava larger and fiercer than before, swearing to reduce them to ash as it launched a blazing fireball that Keenis met head-on, shielding his servant, while the young man gave precise instructions to counterattack once the bird slowed. As the phoenix surged forward, Keenis leapt into the air and intercepted it, slamming it down and delivering a flurry of devastating blows before seizing its body and crushing it with raw strength, leaving the young man stunned by how effortlessly his master cleared the second phase. But as the phoenix lay dying, it promised to rise again, and in that critical second rebirth, Keenis seized its body and unleashed a relentless barrage of strikes at its core to stop its resurrection once and for all. Amidst a violent volcanic eruption, the young man instructed the fire mouse Squeaky to lure Keenis back to the cliff, bracing himself as he realized that the true challenge was only just beginning, recalling his many failed attempts against the phoenix where entire teams had fallen short of stopping its rebirth due to the catastrophic eruptions that marked the bird's will to return. And remembering how he had spent months devising a countermeasure, he now prayed his master could execute. The plan unfolded as the mouse dashed ahead with Keenis relentlessly chasing until they reached the cliff's edge, and when Squeaky leapt across, Keenis instinctively followed, unable to stop, giving the young man the perfect moment to act as he activated a skill that summoned a massive wooden catapult at the edge. Urging the frightened mouse to be brave, he reminded it that it should take pride in being the only creature able to guide the master, then fired the catapult to launch the mouse like a projectile directly toward the volcano's heart, where the phoenix's core pulsed violently within the molten fire. And there, standing atop the blazing core as Keenis streaked toward it at rocket speed, Squeaky prepared to play its crucial role in the decisive moment of the battle. The mouse recalled in terror that a follower could not be harmed by its master's attacks, and wondered if the young man had deceived it. But in the next instant, Keenis slammed into the phoenix's core with overwhelming force, shattering it completely, prompting the young man to cheer the success of his plan as he swiftly secured the dormant bird's core, while a flood of system messages confirmed the phoenix's defeat, declared the lava zone as the master's territory, announced their record breaking fastest victory, and rewarded him with 30 RPP. The mouse awoke in confusion, briefly thinking it had reached heaven, only for the young man to mock its foolishness until it realized it was still alive and trembled with fear,